Okay, this is Gone with the Wind, a continuation of the book review. This is part 3 of 3 parts. The first part I did was a lot of paintings of the Civil War to give you the background story. The second part was scenes from the movie and explain them in the context of the book. And this third part, I'm going to go in more detail through some of the literary, historical, and other aspects of it. Oop, my little background towel fell. Okay, highest grossing movie, we talked about that. 49 hours long on audio CDs, we talked about that. The unique thing about this, amongst the greatest books of all time, is that it was mostly about women, especially Scarlet, but a lot about Melanie too. It was written by Margaret Mitchell, who was Irish herself, Catholic like Scarlet, feisty brunette, hot-tempered, who had a life similar to Scarlet in many ways. She herself, too, had hurt her leg badly from being injured by a fall from a horse, and Scarlet's father had a similar problem with that, and her baby with Rett, Bonnie, died in trying a horse jumping accident. Okay. Scarlet's mother was very religious, and Scarlet admired her and said she was like the Virgin Mary. That's a little bit similar to Margaret Mitchell admiring her mother in some ways, but her mother being very stoic, even a little cold. I would say that Scarlet, though, despite all her heroism and a lot of wonderful things about her, she was a bad wife and a bad mother, breaking her family apart, doing stuff for financial reasons in a dishonest way. Let's see. She's very stuck up about having a thin waist. We talked about Ashley Wilkes being the great Southern gentleman, married to Melanie. Rett Butler being the brave Southern businessman. Okay. Oh, and this is the best way to teach a history. I'm telling you, there's nothing as memorable as this book for learning about 1860 to 1870. The experiences of all the families, it ties in exactly. You remember it the rest of your life easily. And I've learned that from experience, because I read tons of history, but nothing stuck with me as well as this book, except for the other historical novels I read, like Poland by Missioner was the best way to learn Polish history. Trinity by Leon Uris is the best way to learn the history of Ireland. This is the best way to learn the history of the Civil War. There's nothing like it. After the Civil War, too, the North didn't leave them alone. They imposed martial law, would not let the Southerners vote. They brutalized them, man. They had carpetbaggers came in and raised the taxes on the Southerners' properties. They knew they couldn't pay it, and they just took their property away from them, stole it from them. And this movie in the 1930s was banned in both Germany and in Russia because they felt it gave too much hope to people. In some ways, this was a redemption of the South, if you will. Margaret Mitchell had grown up in Atlanta. Her father was a member of the Atlanta Historical Society, and she had heard all the stories of Atlanta. And her mother took her around the South, in a carriage with a horse, and seeing all these places that had been burned down and destroyed by the North. And then she heard all these old men from the South telling all the stories of the war, and she really learned the history well with the help of her father, too. And the other thing about Margaret Mitchell, she married her husband, was a reporter and a literature writer guy, so he was very helpful to her for editing her writing. She was very emotional, hot-headed, very intelligent. She wrote a magnificent book, but she was the perfect person to write it. She herself, grew up from Atlanta. Dad was the Atlanta Historical Society guy, and that's the way the book reads. You see one historical scene after another, and it's just perfectly portrayed, and the effect on the families, it was great. Margaret Mitchell said if Gone with the Wind did have a theme, it would be survival, the way hardships make or break people. Why do some people survive and some don't? One of the qualities of the survivors is they tend to have gumption. They're tough. They can get through it. They can handle the sorrow. And Scarlet was a perfect example of it. So on the one hand, you really admire Scarlet. She is gutsy. She is tough. She's brave. She does whatever she has to do to survive and to make money for her family and to keep Tara from being stolen away by the carpetbaggers, the Yankees, okay? GW, Gone with the Winds also is basically the collapse of a civilization. The South collapsed, all right? It just collapsed because it was overwhelmed, not because it was decadent. Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy in the movie, was the first black lady to ever win the supporting actress. And it said when she was mad, Mammy had a face like a thundercloud. She was a great actress. She was perfect. She was also just like the book. The casting of the movie was perfect. It was just like the book. When you read the book, you see the characters that were in the movie. And Margaret Mitchell did a lot of nice stuff. She funded a whole bunch of Negro scholarships for Morehead College. She was pretty generous as far as that was concerned. Scarlet's father had told her land is the most valuable thing you could ever own, and that's partly why Scarlet was so attached to the family childhood plantation, Tara, and would do anything for it. There's lots of great lines in the movie. Those are some of the best ones there. I kind of repeated them. Scarlet at the end saying, "Tomorrow's another day." Rhett Butler leaving her saying, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." And then earlier when Scarlet held her fist in the air and said, "As God is my witness, I will never go hungry again." Other things, Scarlet again was the belle of the barbecue, flirting with all the guys to make Ashley jealous. Scarlet said to Rhett Butler, "You are no gentleman," and Rhett Butler said to Scarlet, "You are no lady." That was typical dialogue between them. They're always arguing, and it's funny and it's clever, but eventually it becomes quite destructive and it ruins their marriage, and it's very sad. It leads to the death of one of their children. And there was another line at the end of the movie. It said, if she had known Ashley Wilkes how he really thinks, she would never have loved him. He just lusted after her because she was pretty. He didn't really ever have any significant interest in her. And if she had known how Rhett Butler really thinks, she would have never let him go. Rhett really loved her. Rhett was a great man, and she just treated him like crap and ruined everything. It's like for no reason. And yeah, I love the way Margaret Mitchell, you can hear her talking, in the form of Scarlet, and man, you see the screwed up psychology of her, but a lot of women think that way. I know from personal experience they do, and it messed things up big time. Let's see. There's a lot of stuff about the social squabbles between the Old South and the New South. A little bit about the slavery, not much on that. Scarlet's emotions, she's totally volatile. And in my experience, a lot of women are like that. They're up and down, up and down. A man has to stay in a narrow range. And if you look at a brain of a man, his pituitary is relatively small. A woman's pituitary premenopausal is huge. And they got their menstrual cycle, but they also have emotional cycles. Plus, a woman has a wide dynamic range. A man, if he gets too loud, people think he's violent, and that's dangerous, so he's not allowed to be that way. If he cries and acts like a sissy, they think he's a wuss, so he's not really allowed to be that way either. So a man stays in a relatively narrow dynamic range, and even the best men often stay in a more narrow dynamic range almost all the time, because they have to be able to control their emotions. So this is like Rhett Butler. He's sort of most of the time a cool character, but after his daughter died, he just lost it, and he became an alcoholic for a while. Whereas Scarlet and some of the other women, they're up and down, and the danger is, in one of their down, pissed off moods, they can do something terrible, like move out of the bedroom with Rhett, is what Scarlet did at one point. Or I've seen this in regular life. A woman gets pissed off, and she's in a bad mood, says she wants a divorce, and then later on she knows it's wrong, but she won't admit she was wrong. And things stay screwed up. We talked about Sherman sacking and burning Atlanta. And there was a little bit of that scene of escaping from the fire and burning Rome, and that reminded me a little bit of escaping from Troy by Aeneas carrying his father Anchises out of there. It also reminded me of Mount Vesuvius volcano engulfing Pompeii and coming out of there. And these are other, saving what's left of a civilization. The idea of St. Augustine writing the book about the city of God when Rome was being sacked. The Civil War, documented by Ken Burns, I told you, was a total joke. It totally glorified the North. It sucked, I thought. What else here? Some of this we already know. Rhett Butler and Scarlet were perfect together. They're so funny when they were arguing. And he knew how to put her in her place very well. He was older than her. He's about 17 years older than her, so he's a lot more intellectually, socially sophisticated than she was. She was instinctually very clever. This is just some things from the war. Like I pretty much mentioned this when I was talking about the picture about how the North brutalized the South and how Lincoln refused the trading prisoners because he knew by attrition it was to his advantage. He, all his life, had wanted to deport the slaves out of the USA. Up until his dying day, he was still doing that. This talks a lot of the secondary characters. Some of the great lines. The lazy luxury of the old days was gone. Okay, his face went crimson, and her face went crimson, and she did not answer. The writing is just beautiful. It's just so elegant. It's so perfect. You can see all the characters in your mind's eye, and the movie perfectly matches the book. Margaret Mitchell saw the movie, and she loved it. She recognized that it was magnificent. And when you hear the descriptions of the male characters, the female characters, they're just perfect. It's beautiful. I'm not even going to repeat all those lines, but they were magnificent. I enjoyed the book from start to finish. I couldn't believe it. And it was kind of brutal. I mean, there was rough stuff in the book. That's partly why it seemed so real. There was some cruelty. There was some inappropriate, obvious behavior. There were a lot of things in there. But it always echoed true, and that's why it was so great. You could see people behaving like that even when they were bad. Okay, I talked about all of these things. I'm not going to go into all the details. I would have, if I was writing, I maybe would. Oh, I'm not going to get into all that either. I don't want to get into that. Gerald's death. That was sad. Scarlet's father died. The old Irish guy is a tough old Irish guy. I liked him. I talked about the Lincoln book already. There's the Lincoln book. Okay, and I think that's basically all I've got, but it was magnificent. I could even talk more about this, but I think I've covered it enough for our purposes. So I hope you enjoyed that. The movie's well worth watching. You might be able to catch it free at some of the other video channels. Otherwise, you could buy it. The audiobook is well worth listening to. The lady who read the audiobook, Linda something, again, here's what it looks like. It was, she did a perfect job. She's from the South. She had all the accents just right. And Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind, narrated by Linda Stevens. It's a masterpiece. It's an all-time artistic masterpiece. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.